Welcome to the Belmont Stakes preview video here on FTN Bets. I am your host, Benny Ricciardi of Betting with Benny. And as always, when we're talking horse racing, I got two of the best minds in the horse racing game here with me today from OptixEQ, the founders, the brain trust, the people who basically do everything over there at OptixEQ. We started with Emily last time, so this time we'll go with Mr. John Doyle. How are you today, sir?
All right, Benny. How you doing? Hey, I just got to give a shout out to one of our other partners, our technology guy, Dave Kuhn, the best, Dr. Dave Kuhn, PhD, awesome guy.
I can tell you from being a company that is deep in technology that the technology guys do tend to go overlooked, and they are a major part of everything that happens here. Without them, you guys probably wouldn't see any of the stuff that we're able to do. And that probably goes for OptixEQ as well. So shout out to him as well. And Miss May Hemley, how are you this morning?
I'm doing well. As we were talking about, a busy week, but exciting week. Good day of stakes action. And I'm looking forward to going into this race because John and I kind of already talked about it. We have some kind of conflicting thoughts on the race, which always makes it interesting. And then also for people that are, new to optics or, looking at different types of pieces of information, they always think there's like one way to look at it, but it's all, how you interpret the data. So I think that'll be kind of interesting as we go through this as well.
Well, you guys did a great job interpreting the data the last time, and hopefully everybody out there listening has a little bit more national treasure in their bank accounts after the way that one worked out. So that was a very good Preakness. Let's see if we can kind of help you guys break down the Belmont a little bit. We're going to go through what we always go through here with OptixEQ. We're going to look a little bit with their plot to kind of see where the horses are set to be up, get an idea of the flow of the race and how that should go. We'll talk a little bit about some of the past Belmonts as well, and what kind of horse technically is the kind of horse you want to look at to win a race like this. And then we'll obviously get into the 9 horses in this race. It's not too many, so it shouldn't take us too long to kind of break them all down. And there's at least 1 or 2 of them in here that we probably won't talk much about, if at all, here, because they really don't have much of a chance. But there are a few that do, and we will get into it there. So, John, do you want to start off with the plot? Maybe we'll start there and kind of take a look.
Yeah, first of all, I'm going to go take a little higher view here. So this is the plot. And you can see that we have a standard and surface and distance plot, because standard gives us a little bit more of where the horse is in their form cycle, while surface and distance is particular to a certain surface and distance. And being the Belmont, 12 furlongs, and being this North America, these horses don't run 12 furlongs. So you can see that surface and distance plot is blank. Basically, right? You got all these triangles. We're not able to plot anything. So I'm going to do, just for old people like me and readability, I'm going to make it a little easier to read. So this is the plot in big form. And I wanted to kind of start with this. And again, when you look at this plot, things that Emily and I were talking about, you see this dotted blue line, that's the par line. That means that's how fast the average horse at this, this class level runs to the second call. And you can see the whole field is below that, which is unusual, right? There's not really, even though we know like National Treasure is kind of a speed horse, there's really not a speed horse. And if you see the run styles, we have them mapped out here, early pace, there's really only 2 horses that have kind of done any running as early pace horses. The rest of the horses are presser closers. So this is kind of like a paceless race. And so when you kind of break it down, the way I kind of look at this is, especially with Belmonts, when you're talking about the Belmont, you're talking about horses that can get 12 furlongs. And so late pace is important. And so that we concentrate on squares. That's our late pace, because relative to the other horses, the squares are the horses that close the best. And if you look at kind of like the past Belmonts, I'm going to kind of go through this quickly. And this is just the last 4. We had that 1 year with COVID, so I couldn't do the last 5. The one thing you'll notice is the squares do very well. Squares are the gold. I mean, the gold is the winner, bronze and silver. And you can see the squares have kind of dominated. In fact, in the last 4 Belmonts, the circles have only been in the superfecta twice out of those 4 years. So in the top 4 finishes. So really, when you're looking at this, especially when you're looking at horses that you want to be finishing in a 1.5 mile race, you want to focus on squares in that case. Circles are at a disadvantage. And so, the one of the things you can pop out here, the 1 and the 5 are kind of medium and large circles, kind of makes it difficult for them. So I just think that's the one point I just wanted to make, is that late pace is important. Squares is the way we measure late pace and plot on the plot. And so far, just looking at this, the 1 and 5, we look at horses that might be disadvantaged.
So, John, real quick here, like obviously I've used your product plenty of times before, so I understand the difference. But if there's somebody new out there who hasn't, kind of explain just real quick overview of the difference between what a circle is and what a square is, and what you mean by, the squares do better, the circles do better, like what the running style and all that is, so people understand.
Sure. So when you look at a circle, basically what we do is we plot the horses relative to one another, right? So they're fractional times and all the rest. And the horses that are the fastest are way to the left. And I'm just going to show this so that maybe it's a little easier to kind of see. Early pace horses are going to be to the left. Stalkers are going to kind of be in the middle portion. And then your closers are going to be to the right. When we're talking about circles and squares, the circle is the horse's relative finish ability versus the other horses in the race. So, if you take, for instance, the 5 and you plot him up against claiming horses, he may plot as a square, but relative to the horses in a grade 1 like this in the Belmont, he doesn't match up. And that kind of shows you in terms of the circles and square. Now, that's not to say a circle can't win if they're, they've got some early pace advantage or what, but just from a finishing ability, you want horses, especially in a race like this, finishing, those horses are at a disadvantage. Now, the bigger the circle, the worse the closing is. And the bigger the square, the better the closing relative to the other horses. So that's just the point I want to make. So.
Yep. So that kind of gives you guys an idea of how everything, works out when you're looking at these plots here. So, Emily, I want to switch over to you real quick and ask you a question. When we talked about the Preakness, one of the things that National Treasure was able to do, he slowed that race way down up front. I think it was just shy of 24 for the first call. I think it was over 48 for the second call. So like we're talking about here, it was a race that didn't have a lot of pace. There weren't a lot of horses that were running out there fast with him. Do you think that a horse like that might be able to steal a race like this again, considering that there aren't a lot of other horses that are going to go out and try to run to that early lead and, really push him to go a little faster?
Yeah, it's possible, because if we look at the Optics RPM, there's no real E type, right? E horses are horses that need the lead. There's 2 EP types, and those are horses that can be on or near the lead. They can also push the pace. So there could be a scenario where National Treasure does kind of sneak out. But I think it is also important to remember going into the Preakness that there was a significant scratch, which maybe wasn't going to impact the outcome, but certainly did impact the race shape when one of those horses scratched, who we projected to be pushing the pace and pushing National Treasure. That scratch assisted National Treasure as far as the pace on the front end. And by contrast, it also impacted Mage, because he was going to be kind of forced into a role to push the pace if he had any chance to win. And because he didn't take that role to put himself in the position to win, that not only compromised his chances of winning, but also assisted National Treasure. So how the riders decide to ride does impact the race. And then again, as we're talking about this, should there be any significant changes, sometimes, especially as we're looking at this as a race as a whole, not just individual horses, how that impacts one another. Going back to what John said earlier, everything as how these horses are positioned on the plot is in relationship to each other.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about, John mentioned some of the past Belmonts and the kind of horse that tends to come into the money or tends to win here. What is the, what is the type of horse that you're looking for? What are the things you're looking for in a horse's past performance that give you an idea that they could be the Belmont winner here in 2023?
Well, John mentioned finishing ability, which I think is key. But really traditional handicapping, right? Is the horse fast enough? Is the horse in good form? And are they at the right class level? And I think in terms of class, and this looks at the plot a little bit more, and as John mentioned, as far as the par line, is we have the entire field below the par line. And when he was showing the previous plots, it wasn't that you had a bunch of horses above the par line, but at least you had a couple or at least one, and that showed somewhat of a level of class. So when I'm looking at this race and I see all the horses below the par line, that just tells me that this isn't the strongest group. And so while that past information is obviously key, I think that's a good starting point. Sometimes maybe you could get a little bit more creative, maybe see a little bit more chaos, just because you have these horses that aren't necessarily the standout type horses, and maybe it takes the right horse on the right day, not necessarily the best horse, in order to win.
So, John, I know you had something to say about that too. So, same question to you. What are you looking for? What are the type of horse that you're trying to find when you're looking to see who you think are going to be your, the horses that you're using here in the Belmont?
Yeah, I mean, I like horses with, the Belmont's so much different, Benny. I mean, it's 12 furlongs. They've never been this much. So, like, the contentious, you're not going to get like a hot pace like you did in the Kentucky Derby, right? You're just not. First of all, the number of horses in the race, they're not going to be amped up like they were. And you're going a different distance, so the tactics are going to be different. And there's not a lot of speed in the race. So really what you're looking for is horse maybe with some tactical speed, not be able to stay close and then be able to finish, So that, you're looking for squares more like, when you just kind of look at this plot, yeah, maybe the 4 can get the distance if he's not, all depends on what the 1 does and what the 5 does early on. But the horses like Arcangelo and Forte should be sitting pretty good trips, right off the pace. And then, like the deeper closers, I mean, you can kind of look at this, I'm a little bit against Red Route just because he's just such a deep closer. He's going to be kind of disadvantaged. And I think the 8 and Angel of Empire has been coming at a better race, faster paces and gotten flow. And you can see that's why he's high up. He's kind of a closer, but he's really high up on our y-axis. I just think the 2 might be more of a natural closer. I think, and once we get into the form, I'll show you why I think the 2 is probably the best suited for the 12 furlongs. So, but that's kind of layout. You're really always looking for horse with tactical speed who can finish. That's pretty much the case. I just think 12 furlongs is different, and trying to really analyze the pace, who's going to get the lead. I think you're just wasting your time. I think you're kind of looking for horses that, like to Emily's point, have class, right, and are fast enough and can finish. I mean, that's kind of the way I look at it.
All right. So it sounds to me like some of the horses in that stalker category are going to kind of be where we're looking here for, a lot of what we're doing. Do you guys have anything else you want to add here before we start getting in and talking about some of these horses?
No.
I'm ready to dive in.
All right. Let's start right there. Do you got something you want to throw up here, John, so we can go through, or you want me to just start going down the list?
No, you could see it. Could you see my screen? Yeah. I'm on the Capit Shoes is the first horse. Could you guys see that or no?
Yep. So we'll start right there with the 1 horse with Tappet Shoes. 1 lifetime win. It was a 50K maiden special weight at Fairgrounds. This is a horse going off at 20-1. Any interest in this horse at all there, Emily?
So there's a couple things. One, I mean, you look at the plot, and it's a horse that, as John mentioned, isn't as strong as some of the others. Now, at the same time, when I look at his grid, I don't see any red. I don't see any red in there. And I can look at the optics figures and see a horse that has shown improvement race to race. So, as a long shot horse, when you're assessing long shots, sometimes you get, 2 types of long shots: a horse that's going to be overlooked by the public and has factors that make them a contender. And sometimes they're long shots because what they're going to need to do in order to win, they haven't done yet. So this horse falls into that second category where he's going to have to improve. But he's shown he's kind of improving race to race. He's fresh coming into the race. Finished in a blanket finish with Red Route 1, the number 9, a horse that ran in the Preakness Stakes. And that race, a $200,000 race, it's not a graded stakes race, but the purse for that race and the optics figure range for that race are similar to the Peter Pan. So if I'm just kind of comparing like kind of apples to apples or apples to oranges in that scenario, I can say that he's got a little bit of class, and maybe there's a little bit of upside, and he hasn't shown any distance limitations. So as a long shot, if you really want to get creative on the win end, or, include in some of those tickets, but maybe a horse that just happens to save ground and get themselves into the mix at a price.
All right. So definitely not a horse we're going to put a line through here, John, but,
No.
Is this a horse that you have a lot of faith in, or think that this could be somebody who hits the board?
I think he's got a long shot chance. I think the tactics are going to probably go to the front, possibly, or this horse could be in the front, or it could be sitting maybe a pocket trip. So you never know. I mean, to Emily's point, you never want to disparage an improving horse, and until this horse steps back, you don't know, right? Again, big question is the distance. A couple of no leads, no lines trouble me in this horse, as far as, concerns about going the distance. Lacks the kind of seasoning some of these others, but Yeah, some of Emily's points are okay. It's a long shot, and if you want to take a shot, go ahead, for maybe exotic finish, maybe.
All right, so John, I'm going to stay here with you to talk about the number 2 horse here, Tapit Trice. Won the Tampa Bay Derby, won the Bluegrass Derby, all out to win the Bluegrass Derby by a neck or by a nose there at the end, depending on who you're looking at and who put that race together. And then he came back and kind of ran a pretty blah race in the Kentucky Derby. Got stuck wide, never really got into the mix, never really got into the running. So here's the question. I know last time we talked a little bit about form cycle. Do you think this is a horse that was just all out in the Bluegrass and just kind of bounced in the Derby? Are you giving him, the Derby is obviously a race with, 20 horses, or I don't know if there were 20 this year. I think it was a little bit less with a scratch or two. But there's a lot of horses in that race. It's different than any other race that these horses are probably going to run in for their entire career. Are you willing to give him an excuse on that one and think that he can come back strong here? What's your thoughts on Tapit Trice?
Yeah, I guess back in I guess it was February, this horse ran at Gulfstream. I did the grades for that, and I thought this horse ran a really strong race because I just don't see those kinds of finishes at Gulfstream at that kind of allowance level. I thought it was I gave it A-, which is the highest we can give it. So I saw potential in this horse, and you notice the keyword I used, marathon, because I always thought this horse was suited for long distance races, and he's the only horse in this race that has that designation that we've given that keyword. So I've always thought this was kind of the right thing for this horse, 10, 12, 11 furlongs. And you can see, he's the problem with him, Benny, he's a little bit of a head case. You can see that he was very slow out of the gate. He's got some issues with gates and stuff like that early on. But you notice all his projections for us was stretch. So then he gets to the Churchill race and just kind of lays an egg. Maybe the crowd, maybe whatever. And we don't have this here. I didn't do the notes on here, but when I looked at the race, I thought, is there a possibility that this horse didn't handle the track? Okay. Mm-hmm. That's just my take. Don't know. I would watch him training coming up to this race, though, and I haven't looked at the works and stuff yet. But he's a horse that I always thought was suited to this distance. And in a field where there's not a lot of pace, you would think, I don't want the closer, right? But I just think this field could get kind of bunched up. And this is a horse that has probably the best 2 furlong speed in the race. And I think he'll be finishing, and I like him. I'm not crazy about the price, especially his method. So maybe if that price is a little bit inflated, he might be a horse that I consider betting. But I always kind of liked him for this particular profile of a race.
Yeah, from what I saw, I think he's like 3-1 on the early line. Is that right?
Yeah.
So he's, he's not the favorite, but he's basically right there. There's 2 other horses that are 5-2, 7-2. They're all kind of bunched together here. So Emily, same question basically for you. Do you think this is, are you willing to excuse the Derby for him because of how he ran there? Maybe it was that he bounced. Maybe he didn't like the track. Maybe it was just the fact that, he got pushed wide and never really got into it. Is this a horse that you think can turn the tide today?
Well, yeah, I think so. As John pointed out, the reasons to like him, but really my biggest knock is the price, because he's just not a horse I can trust at 3-1. And I think that a lot of people have kind of keyed in on him as being a Belmont horse early on, whether it's, they like the pedigree or, Pletcher's record in this race. And so I don't necessarily know he's going to drift up from that. So he would be no surprise, to your point. Can he turn it around? Can he win this race? Absolutely. He's just a tougher one for me to play at a shorter price.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That he's tougher to trust and creates his own issues.
Yeah, and that brings up a great point about how you guys should be looking at these horse races. If a horse is 3-1 and you think he has some chinks in his armor, maybe that's a horse that you try to beat. Now, if that same horse is 10-1, then that's a horse that you want to bet on. So really the price is going to matter a lot when you're looking at these things. And remember, in a pari mutual kind of wagering situation like we have on a lot of these races, that price is going to fluctuate as the race, as it gets closer to the race, as more money comes into the pool, as a bunch of drunk people start betting as they're hanging out at Belmont Park all day long, which is always the way that it works out there. Yeah. So let's talk about go ahead, John.
Just I just say my fair value would be if I can get 4-1, I would bet this horse. Because one other thing I just want to point out about him, when you look at, and I've done some looking at sectional times and stride and stuff like this, this horse has a massive stride data wise. And so, again, that's why I kind of like him for the 12. It's pedigree. I'm not much into pedigree at all. It's all about visually how they look and, the times they run and how they run it and all the rest. So anyway, that's just the point. 4-1 would be fair value for me.
Yeah, and when John talks about stride, what he's basically saying is if you have a horse that can cover more ground with each step that he's taking, he's obviously going to be able to kind of move faster than another horse that may need, more steps to cover that same amount of ground. So that's really what they're talking about. Think about like an NBA player like Giannis Antetokounmpo, 6'11", running full speed up and down the floor, versus somebody like me who's 5'9". He's going to cover a lot more ground with each step he takes than I am. So there's a pretty good chance that he's going to beat me in whatever that race. And that's kind of what we're talking about here. So Emily, I'm going to go to you for the next horse here. That is Arcangelo, who we started talking about a little bit there. Maiden special weight win at Gulfstream in March, came back and won the Peter Pan at Belmont, the track he's going to be running on here. So he's obviously a horse for course that kind of likes it over here. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I mean, he's, it's another horse. You look at his grade, there's no red, an improving type horse, has those strong grades, the A- when he broke his maiden, a B+ winning the Peter Pan. The B+ is often an indicator the horse can step up in class. I could even make a note going back to his debut, because this is a horse I was actually watched training in the morning, and I'm like, this horse can run. And I bet him at one of the Hawthorne pool parties that day. So he's a horse that he's always had ability and seems to be putting it all together. Now, as far as coming into this race, it is that step up in class, but it's also a subtle change in terms of distance. So even though he went the 9 furlongs last out and has progressed as far as distance, this is his first 2-turn race. This will be the first time that he's around 2 turns in his career. So those are just factors to consider as far as odds. And I compared that most recent start, the Peter Pan, to Tapit Shoes earlier, kind of going off those 2 grade 3 efforts. And the Peter Pan did have a slightly lower optics figure range than the Bathhouse Row Stakes, that $200,000 at Oaklawn Park. So this is going to be a step up. This is going to be a test around 2 turns, a horse that kind of for those same reasons, improving, tough to knock, but will come down to price.
So John, I want to ask you this question about the same horse here. We mentioned that this is a horse, or Emily mentioned this is a horse that's stepping up in class. But we've also mentioned that this is a race where the class isn't the top class that we usually have, right? Like this is usually, we usually see some better class horses running into Belmont than we have running into Belmont this year. So do you think this is one of those horses that can make that next step, and that this is the year where a horse like that can make that next step?
Yeah, I do. I do think he's the kind of horse that can make that step to the points Emily made, because you don't see, again, another horse that got an A- breaking his maiden. We kind of project, when you see that, we're projecting the horse to be something kind of special. And then he comes back in that Peter Pan. I just want to let you know, in that Peter Pan, what happened was he made a wide move. And if you look at this race shape, it was very slow, very slow. So he's closing into a very slow pace. And he catches the horse, and you've seen it a million times, the horse that was inside rebroke, and it looked like, okay, race is over. Then he rebroke again. So he showed a lot of grit, and I just thought that was a class race. So I think, even though he may not be running in those class races yet, he has shown class at every step in the races he has. So until we can say, well, he's hit a level that he's, not capable of going beyond, we keep saying there's a possibility. And the only problem with him, again, I shouldn't say problem. I think that's a fair value. In fact, I think the morning line is a very good morning line, just my opinion. I think it's going to be close to what really happens. Maybe with the exception of, I think Forte might be lower, but at 8-1 or 10-1, this horse is a very, decent horse to put, some money behind, just to see, can he go the next step? Because he's definitely got some real talent.
Yeah, 8-1 is where he's sitting right now. So we'll see how that goes off at race time. I got a little problem here. We like all these horses. We haven't been able to erase any or throw any out or cross any out here yet. So the list is starting to get a little long, and we're going to have to add another one here to the list. National Treasure, the Preakness winner from last time out. John, I'm going to start with you here, because here's my problem with this horse. I think he got everything to go his way in the Preakness in order to win that race. It was super slow up front. He was on the pace. He went to the lead. He kind of walked, as we like to say, for the first half mile of that race. And then when he had the run, he still had enough in the tank because he was able to get away with those early numbers. Now, again, maybe he's able to get away with them again this time because it doesn't look like there's a ton of speed in this race that's really going to force him to have to go a lot faster. But you got to think that at least somebody's going to run with him this time, right? And if they do, is this horse going to be able to get the extra distance and hold on like he did in the Preakness? That's my concern. What do you think?
I agree. I don't think he gets the distance. I just, that's a sense I have. And he, to your point, that's why you have this red, easy lead. He really had it his own way. And even if he has it his own way in the Belmont, which is possible, I just don't like him for 12 furlongs. I mean, now he hasn't proved anything like he can't get, like I don't know yet until we see. But I just, the sense I got in the Preakness, he had his own way. She did kind of battle back. When that horse came to him, the Chad Brown horse, but still, I just question it, especially he's kind of was running the same race and then he kind of peaked. And I'm just thinking it may be more conducive to the track and the trip that day. And I think he regresses. And I think he will get some maybe surprise pressure. And the fact that he, like we said, he's not above the par line, so he doesn't have that kind of dynamite speed. He's more of a plotter. I think he'll get outplotted, outrun late. And so, yeah, I'm with you. I'm against this horse. So I'm not with National Treasure.
So, Emily, are you on National Treasure in this one or no?
It's funny because when John brings up the plot, says the squares with positional speed. That's the only reason that I kind of upgraded him, right? Because it's like he's like a quad one square that has positional speed, and all horses are individuals and they're all different. So I'm not a big fan of this comparison, but there's so many Stafford horses over the year that I've been like against off previous races that they've won because they've had everything their own way. And I think they're going to back up and they're going to finally get tested and get exposed and blah, blah, blah. And then they win. And so it's like, I could see this horse falling into that category. But again, it's just, it's not another horse I'm excited to bet. I agree with John as far as the morning line. And, maybe 5-1, he is a player. If he drifts up from that, you can make a case for him just from a value standpoint. Not even if you don't have to necessarily like the horse, but to think he's fair odds, that makes him playable. And so that's kind of where my opinion is, because as an individual, I agree with John. And then kind of looking through the field, it's like, maybe the price is right on this type of horse. And I'd be silly to not, consider that over kind of my own sort of feelings, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And here's a question I want to throw at both of you here with this horse, right? Is coming off the win in the Preakness, do you really think this horse is going to go off at like 5-1? Because I have a feeling that he's going to be a horse that a lot of casual players are going to overbet in this race. And if anything, I'd say he's more likely to go off below 5-1 than he is to drift up higher from here.
I mean, that would make my life a lot easier because then it's a no play, right? Exactly. And it just simplifies. So I kind of agree that I think that sometimes, the Baffert factor, winning last out, big speed figure sitting on top, a race that he kind of looks like he's going to be lone speed again, is probably going to be bet down. I mean, even a little bit shorter.
Yeah, I that's at least the way I'm looking at it. John, do you kind of agree with that?
Yeah, I do.
I do. All right. So there you go. If you get him at 6-1, it might be interesting. If you get him at 4-1, makes it a lot easier to cross him out and go on to some of the other ones. Good. We finally got a horse we can cross out here. So now we're down to 8 from the 9. Yeah, exactly.
Conditionally.
So here's a horse that we might be able to cross out here. 30-1. El Miracola. Let's see. This is a horse. He's been trounced by 10 or more lengths all 4 times he's ran in graded company. Is this just a horse that's outclassed here, John?
Yes. I mean, I'm tossing the horse. I mean, even his win last time at Gulfstream was kind of like, I mean, he showed grit, but he was kind of like no lead, not kind of the key words you want coming into the Belmont. And you could just look at his speed figures. You look at the range, and Emily talked about a couple of times. So what is that OptixEQ range? It's like what we project the low or the high end of this speed figure to be at the end of the race. And you can see he doesn't even match up with the low end. So I'm tossing.
Emily, we don't have to talk too much about this one. Kind of agree here?
Yeah, I'm probably one of the more creative horse players in the game, and I can't get there. So, yeah, good luck.
All right, fair enough. So you know what, Emily, we'll start with you on this next one because this is a horse that I think a lot of people are interested in. 5-2, the morning line favorite, and that's going to be Forte here. Todd Pletcher, Irad Ortiz, 2-year-old champion last year. Let's see, 6 of 7 lifetime, 4 grade 1 wins. I think he has a grade 2 win as well there. I mean, a lot of things to like about this horse. Was one that a lot of people were looking at in the Derby, didn't get into the Derby, needed a little more time. They got him ready for this one. What's your thoughts on him?
Yeah, it's a tricky read. Talked about him going into the Derby. We were pretty negative on him, just the way the race was going to set up, that we'd maybe seen the best of Forte and he would have to improve based on that field. And now he comes into the Belmont where he just might have a class edge over these horses that he wouldn't have had 5 weeks ago or so. And the fact that they are running him, and pressing forward, and his class edge could prevail. And then going back to what John said earlier, when you look at the plot, he does stand out in the plot. And again, going back to the Derby, he wasn't necessarily a horse that stood out in the plot over others. So I came into this, handicapping this race, super critical, knowing he's going to be the favorite, looking to just, check anything I can to make the case against, but he just kind of fits. Another horse I'm not excited about, but I couldn't make all the knocks that I was kind of hoping to when I went through the handicapping process.
John, what's your thoughts here on Forte?
The biggest knock is going to be the price. And they got him 5-2 in the morning line. I believe he'll be much less than that. But at least I would imagine at least 8-5 is my guess on him. I don't know, or 9-5, maybe the highest you're going to get on him. So that's the one knock. Second knock is he's not. I mean, you never want to take too short a price of horse on some horse that's doing something for the first time. He's never been 12 furlongs. Not to say he can't do it, just an unknown, right? And then the third one, and that's the biggest one, is something wrong with him? I mean, they didn't think so. They were going to run him in the Derby, but he scratched out of there, skipped the Preakness. I guess that was never the intention, but still, he's got a layoff here. He was kind of coming into that race kind of at peak in his form cycle, and now that got disrupted. So, when you kind of take horses a little bit off their training and when they were supposed to do, he's kind of geared up to run in that Derby, probably to try to run his best effort, and he got stopped. Don't know. I mean, it's just a question mark. I agree with everything Emily says. He's the class of the field. He's the fastest horse. He's never look at all those B pluses. Really, he's never run a bad race. So, I'm just again, the price wise, I'd probably be taking a shot against him especially if he's 8-5 or something like that, 9-5. It's just I don't know. But I could see people liking him. And I'm not going to say, what I'm going to say, Emily. I'm not going to say he could win.
Yeah. I mean, really, I kind of had to move him up just because I have the same knocks and concerns as you do, right? When you have those unknowns, you have that. I know it's listed as a trainer scratch, but I think it was, it was a vet recommended trainer scratch, if anything, which does create those concerns. But then when you just kind of have knocks on some of the other horses as well. And at least he's proven that way. I can't completely knock him. I'm not, he looks like he's probably the most likely winner, but this is the type of race that we might not see the most likely winner.
Yep. So there you go. And again, the one good thing, if you do want to play against him, if he gets bet pretty heavily and goes down to 6-5, 8-5, even 9-5 there, which is below his line, that means that some of these other horses are going to get a little bit, higher price on them over there. So keep that in mind. That's why we talk a lot about what the price these horses go off at is, because again, the price, makes you like a horse more or less because you're going to like his chances. Your chances are going to be the same. It's whether or not you're getting good value on those chances, which is, what we try to teach everybody here at FTN Bets. So let's talk about the 7 horse here. I think we're on you here, Emily. We'll start with you. Hit Show, the 7 horse. Couple wins at 3. He won the Withers, second by a nose in the Wood Memorial, ran 5th in the Kentucky Derby. He is a horse that is more of a closer. He does have that late kick in a lot of his races that we see. What are your thoughts here on Hit Show at 10-1?
Yeah, his Kentucky Derby was maybe kind of sneaky good, because you mentioned he is a horse that comes from off the pace, and he was a lot closer in the Derby, and the Derby being that fast pace. So could be a little bit upgraded from that. But at the same time, we see the Tactics Plus, putting the horse into the race from the rail, and then the C Plus Optics grade, which just shows that maybe the horse has been a little bit exposed on class, which is, kind of the concern. I think what you see on paper is the type of race that he's going to run, and there's not much upside at this point. And not enough value compensation, in my opinion. I could kind of see the one and the 7 sort of like the same horse at this point, and there's a discrepancy in odds.
So, John, one of the things I wanted to ask you about this horse with Hit Show, are we going to get enough pace? Because this horse sets up to be one of those ones where if the pace falls apart in front of him because it's really, really fast, that's probably the best scenario for him to, come from behind with that late run and pick up the pieces. Do you think we're going to get that in this race, or is this just not the right setup for him?
I agree with Emily on the class. I think this horse, no, I don't like this horse at all. I'm going to show you why. So the first thing is her point about the race. I think he got a perfect trip in the Derby, pretty much the best trip of the horses in the race, maybe with the exception of the third place runner in there, I guess, whatever. But anyway, I'm going to show you, you talked about the pace. I'm going to go back to the plot. Look where Hit Show is on the plot, and look what he is. He's a small circle. He doesn't have the late pace of these other horses. He's been getting kind of setups, and he hasn't been taking full advantage of them. So no, I do not like this horse. I am against this horse. I like even the 1 better than this horse. So he would be higher in odds for me. So for me, I'm passing on Hit Show. Negative.
All right. Another one that we might be able to scratch off. I like it. We're narrowing down the list a little bit here. So that's good. So this next one is one that I don't think we could scratch off. And John, I'm going to start with you on this. That's Angel of Empire, one of the other, lower price horses. That's going to be one of the favorites in this race. 7-2 is the current number on him. Winner of the Grade 2 Risen Star, winner of the Arkansas Derby, came in 3rd in the Kentucky Derby. What are your thoughts here on Angel of Empire?
Can I add one thing real quick, and then I'm going to pass it back to John, just because this wasn't noted up until recently, that they were going to put blinkers on for this race.
Interesting.
Okay, so that makes me even more against this horse, but I was against this horse.
That's why I said it first.
Okay, fair enough.
So Benny, this horse is, in fact, in my opinion, this horse got the best trip in the Derby, right? The other horse maybe got the 2nd or 3rd best. This horse got the best trip. He just kind of followed the winner match all kind of around. And even like, I think whoever was making the call, or Travis Stone or whoever, I think was like, this horse is going to win. You're just like, this horse has got to win this race. And he didn't. He kind of, I don't know if flatten out is the right word, but something. So him going kind of the extra 2 furlongs is a big deal for me. I think he got the setup in the Risen Star. His other race we've kind of labeled as hard. I think this horse is kind of peaked out. I'm looking for a major regression from this horse. And here's the other thing. Let's go back to the plot on this horse. You see where he plots? He plots as a deep closer, and you can see all his races he has trouble to start. The problem is he's not going to get that kind of pace. And you can see, why is he so high up, versus like the 2 and the 9? Because he's been coming out. Look at the race shapes as he's coming out. Very fast, very fast, very fast, very fast. He's been coming out of races that have lend itself to flow of horses coming from behind. He's not going to get that kind of setup. He's got to go the extra 2 furlongs. He's going to be heavily bet based on his high speed figures. I think he's peaked. Blinkers, what are they even thinking here? They want to get him closer, or they want him to break because he can't break. That's a negative to me. That means like they don't have confidence, because if they just say, hey, this horse has been running great, we're going to, we're just going to try this thing. Now we're going to make an equipment change at this point. He's been doing so well. Why would you do an equipment change at this point? Maybe because the problem was in the Derby, he didn't want to go by those horses late. Maybe that's why they're putting the blinkers. Not a good thing. Not a good sign for me. I'm against this horse. I hope he takes a ton of money, because this is the horse I would probably be shorting heavily.
All right. So, Emily, let me ask you a question here, because we talked about National Treasure before the Preakness and how they were putting the blinkers on him and putting him on the rail, and we knew that they were going to fire him out. Now, this is obviously a horse who has a very different running style, and now we're talking about putting blinkers on him. So just explain real quick to people why you think this is a horrible decision versus last time when we thought it was a pretty good decision for them and the way the horse was going to run.
Well, everything is situational and everything is different. National Treasure, you can go back to his past performances, and he had used blinkers a couple times in the past, and so they had already done a pattern where they've done blinkers on, blinkers off, blinkers back on, blinkers off. So it's and also knowing Baffer, that's an angle that this barn will use. And I also noted watching his works that it wasn't, I don't know what style of blinkers they're going to put on Angel of Empire, but watching National Treasure, it was very shallow. So it wasn't a huge equipment change. Plus also it's a different horse, right? So to John's point, and this is why we were negative on, I think it was Rocket Can, right? That added the blinkers and the Derby as well, because it was a horse that had been running competitively. And now you're making an equipment change, right? So like where it was Sun Thunder who was adding the blinkers, I was like, you have nothing to lose. Put him on. Like nothing, it's a long shot. He's got to improve whatever it's going to take at this point. But for Angel of Empire, he's been running those faster speed figures. He's won without the blinkers. He hung a little bit maybe in that last race. If to John's point, that's kind of why they're going to put the blinkers on, maybe get him a little bit more focused. But this just seems like the timing isn't right. It seems experimental. Experimental at a short price is just a negative. And especially we already kind of have some knocks on this horse as an individual before even mentioning that equipment change, which is why I wanted to bring it up first. It's just, I see it the same way. As one of the horses that's going to be a short price, he's going to be one I'm gonna play against as well.
All right, so there you go. Playing against Angel of Empire across the board here, because that was kind of my thought too of the horses I wanted to throw out. So I'm glad you guys kind of made me feel better about that here today. We got one more horse to discuss here, and that's going to be Red Route 1. 10, 2, 2, and 1 lifetime. Been in 7 graded stakes races, has yet to win one of them, has hit the board in about half of them. I think he has 2 seconds and a third. So this is a horse that has run in better company than some of the other ones that we're talking here. Emily, we'll start with you on this one. What do you think about Red Route 1?
I think he's not necessarily one I can see as a win contender, but he's a horse that just always shows up with his race. He's going to be running on late for underneath use, but I can't get any more than that.
John, what are your thoughts on?
I can't add anything. Exactly right.
All right. I like when the two of you are in agreement. That makes it really good, really easy for everything there. The Belmont is going to be this Saturday, so make sure you guys get to wherever you're going to be getting to make sure you can get your bets in. And John, before we sign off here, if you guys want to know who they like, who they're on, not just for the Belmont race, but for everything on that big Belmont card that's going to be going off on Saturday, as well as the card on Friday as well leading up to it, John, let them know where they can go to get all this information that you guys have here at OptixEQ.
Yeah, you go right here at OptixEQ, you go buy, and then you'll see, where you buy our packages. Just want to show you one of the things that we do for the big days like this is our focus report. We break down based on information in our, database, the plot, the notes and stuff. And this is what we did for the previous race. And you can see that we kind of give our line in blue. So you can kind of bet accordingly. You can see we do a rank report and you see, our results are pretty damn good. We had National Treasure right on top of that race. Obviously had a big, return versus the our line. So everything really good. And so you'll see the same thing for the Belmont. Not only we're going to do the Belmont, but there's a whole slew of great graded stakes races. Really great. It's like the next best card maybe to the Breeders' Cup and the Derby at Belmont. So you want to be in on that. And that's what we have. That's what we have going, Benny.
All right, so there you go. Now you guys know where to go to get all this information, and you guys can go get all this information anytime over there at OptixEQ. They do this on a daily basis for all the big races and even the small races in the days where, we don't have $100,000 and $1 million races going out there on the line. So for John Doyle and for Miss May Hemley of OptixEQ, this is Benny Ricciardi with FTN Bets signing off for the Belmont preview. Good luck today, everybody.